128.
You don't really need it anyway.
And we'll go around and do introductions, and I'll start on my left this time, and I'll make sure I don't forget anybody online. Absolutely. And if I do, just chime in, guys. Get my attention. But we'll start to the left there, all the way over there with Mr. Doug Cook.
Doug Cook, Metro Transit Liaison.
Claudia Fugly, MNCCD.
Heidi Meyer, Minnesota CCD.
Can I get it?
Richard Rowan, AARP.
Patsy Murphy, Precinct C.
Andy Streisik, Metro Mobility.
Darrell Paulsen, Vice Chair, and Region F, I believe.
Allison Edmond.
Patty Thorson with Trellis Theory Agency on Aging.
Jeff Danes, Precinct D.
Eric Henriksen, MCD.
Carrie Sheldon, Precinct G.
Chris Bates, Precinct B.
Ken, I think your mic was muted.
Oh, okay. I'll try again.
No, we just.
Hey, Ken Rodgers, District D.
Sorry about that. I have one here. Sorry, I got one. I just wasn't paying attention. All right. So, are we done with introductions?
I believe so, yes.
And then before we make an approval to approve the agenda, I would like to make an amendment to the agenda. I would like to talk about the doors closing on the north side of the state office building, adjacent to Metro Transit.
Oh, yeah.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
Darrell, this is Chris Bates. I also have an item
Yes, Chris.
that because of we have to give notice, we need to amend our bylaws because when we changed the bylaws pre-COVID, we did not allow remote participation in the meetings, and we need to take that out of the bylaws. But we have to give notice, so I'm just asking that you put that into agenda for the May meeting.
All right, I will definitely look at that, and we'll address that with the chair.
And Darrell, I brought that up when this was being transferred over, and I was told by Andy that we couldn't do certain things, so he's right. We need to relook at that.
Yes, Andy.
Chris, members of the committee, yeah, technically, the Metropolitan Council's interpretation of Minnesota's open meeting law says that, generally speaking, remote attendance is not allowed for our advisory committees, including the TAAC, if they are public meetings. The reason that you are attending remotely is because of a reasonable modification request. So obviously that can trump our existing bylaws. But the council's interpretation of open meeting law is that our advisory committees at the Met Council are not subject to virtual attendance.
Okay, thank you, Andy.
And with that, can I get an approval of today's agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. I guess we already did discussion, so I did that backwards.
Can I ask one thing? To Andy, to the question earlier?
Go ahead. Sorry about that.
if you
This is out
are-
of order, but I'll let you.
Okay, I didn't know if I could or not. I just
Go
wanted
ahead.
to. So what happens if you're sick but you can't be in the room, but you can attend in other ways? You know what I mean? Would that count as video? You know what I mean? Like you don't want to give it to the whole world.
Yes, Andy.
Yeah, Heidi, members of the committee, typically the council's stance on these meetings is that remote attendance is not allowable, and that in general, sporadic illness is not a reason to attend remotely. It would be a reason to just not attend at all.
Okay.
But again, that said, reasonable modification is a federal civil right, certainly trumps council bylaws. And if there's a disability-related reason that it is necessary for anybody to attend remotely, they can go through that process to do so.
Thank you. And with that, can I get an approval of March 1st, the installment meeting on March 1st, 2023 of the Transportation Accessibility Advisory Committee?
Patsy moves.
Second. Richard.
Thank you. Patsy moved, Richard second. Any further discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor of approving the minutes of March 1st, 2023 of the tech installment, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. Hearing nothing, motion passes. And then this may be a good time for us to discuss my motion or proposed motion for the door closure, or we could do committee reports. Ken, I guess that's up to Ken and Chris as well. Do you guys want to do committee reports first, or do you guys want to discuss my motion first?
Mr. Chairman, let's just get the committee reports out of the way.
I like that. Okay, so we have a blue line report with Ken Rodgers.
All right, and can you hear me okay?
I can.
Yep.
Thank you. So Blue Line is, again, we're just ramping. Excuse me. We're just ramping up for the new round of the CAC meetings. As you may remember, we had traveled quite a distance in our process, and then BNS Rail failed to engage in conversations with us, which required a realignment of the route. So all that work stopped, put on hold, and reconvened as a brand new citizen advisory committee that just got underway about a month ago. It's slowly been ramping up. There's a lot of displacement prevention work being done in the area, and the final alignment still has not quite yet been finalized yet, but the process for the environmental evaluation has begun. So we're in the early stages of reorganizing the Blue Line extension discussions. And as a matter of fact, our next meeting is tonight. So I should have a fresh update for you next week. That's where we are.
Thank you, Ken. One question that I had, this is the chair, Darrell Paulsen, and vice chair rather. I was wondering, you said you're in the beginning stages, so are you starting your environmental study phase 1 again with the Blue Line extension? Because I was told that we don't always have to, we can use the environmental study in certain parts of the line, but we do have to do the environmental study on the identified part of the line that you mentioned. So I was wondering, is that still true, or are we starting back to environmental study square one?
Yeah, good question. We are basically starting from scratch. I say that's in general terms. We are going to use as much of the previous environmental impact statements that was created before, but we have to go through all of the entire process of obtaining input from the community as we progress through the process. So we're treating it as if it's a brand new environmental impact statement. And that's what the feds require.
Yeah, thank you. We're doing something similar to, on that, along the purple line. I'll mention that during my report. And next would be the green line, report, Christopher Bates. You got a report for
Mr.
us?
Chairman, the construction progress is going on. Actually, over the weekend, I visited the Eden Prairie City Center site, and I think they took into account and are dealing with the issues that we brought up when they did the construction. And I saw the Hopkins site. Now, I do have a question when we get to the legislative update, because the folks that are, the staff is not keeping the advisory committee informed of what's happening with dealing with the budget overrun and how they're handling it and what the council's going to do or what the state's going to do with that budget overrun. So I would ask that you ask Hannah when she makes her presentation to please deal with that. Otherwise, things are looking good.
Thank you, Chris. You can ask Hannah yourself when she comes and presents to us. You just keep that question in queue and you can ask her. I know she'll be willing to try to give you an answer.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. And with that, I have a gold line report. The gold line is moving along quite well, quite steadily. We've done some construction. There was some stuff done along the line in Woodbury just recently, and then more importantly, I haven't been following the gold line as much because of its in process to be constructed. So I apologize, and I'll give you a better report next month. But more importantly, I am following the purple line, and the purple line, which would be, which is the line that goes, let me think about this, north and south, I believe. Yeah, and it would be, it goes by 3M there, and it goes to the Maplewood Transit Center and so forth. We're looking at because of some commotion or some expression, I should say. I shouldn't say commotion. Some expression of some residents along the Bruce Vento Trail, which is a regional trail, which was designated in 1980. Actually, I think it was even earlier than 1983, but it was dedicated to be a light rail or to be a rail type system. Because of some residents in that area, they do not want a BRT or light rail to go along the Bruce Vento Trail. So they have engaged with several different groups. We have now entered into another agreement with Ramsey County, and Maplewood just last month agreed to look at option number 14, which would take the BRT off the Bruce Vento Trail, which means that it would not adhere to the ADA requirements or to the necessary upgrades or the improvements that we would have had if BRT is along the Bruce Vento Trail. But they are looking at another study and bringing it down White Bear Avenue. That, in that sense, I was told that the environmental study that was done, because we're already 30% done with that project, stands. But in the area of White Bear Avenue, where we want to look at that, we do have to do the environmental study there, and that's what I was trying to see if that aligns up with your issue, Ken, and can we use the studies that we've already paid money for? And the answer is yes. So that is my purple line report, and my gold line report will stand until next month. So that is our committee reports at this time. And then I would want to see if anybody has any questions on those reports, and if they don't, then I'll just jump right into, well, since Hannah's here, we can do the legislative report, and then we'll come back for my potential letter with Metro Transit and the state office building, et cetera, et cetera.
Oh, yeah.
So can we, so at this point, we can do the legislative update with Hannah if she's ready for it.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. It's good to see you all again. As a reminder, Hannah Pallmeyer, I'm the Government Affairs Liaison here at the Met Council, and my pronouns are she, her. Thank you for having me again to your meeting today. I thought we could just kind of go through some of the omnibus bill information that's come out in the past few weeks, and then I could give you an update on some of our other initiatives that are working through the process in their own way. So yesterday was the third deadline at the legislature, which is the deadline by which committees need to take action on some of the more major spending bills, or what are called omnibus bills. And then the legislature is actually off starting today and into Monday, and they'll be back on Tuesday. So a little bit of downtime for me to get caught up on my emails and other things. So the third deadline, as I said, was yesterday. And so there's been a lot of activity in both the House and the Senate on getting their omnibus bills together. And an omnibus bill is a bill that is a large bill that is usually about a subject area and then contains many smaller bills or proposals within it. So both the House and the Senate have put together their own transportation omnibus bills, and then they kind of move through the process in their individual bodies, and then once they both pass off of the floor of their bodies, then they are compared to see what's the same and what's different. And then there are opportunities to try to work out the differences between both the bodies and what's called a conference committee. And then if those conference committees can agree on what to put in the bills, then the bills kind of become one bill and then go back to their bodies for a final vote. So we're at the beginning process of that. Both the House and the Senate released their omnibus bill language for transportation last week. And there are some similarities in the bills, and there are also some differences in the bills that would be worked out in a future conference committee. So for the House Transportation Omnibus Bill, that passed the House Transportation Committee, I think on Friday, and then it passed the House TAAC Committee yesterday. And then the next step for the bill will be that it will be heard in the House Ways and Means Committee at some point. That hasn't been scheduled yet, but the House Ways and Means Committee is the equivalent of a finance committee. So what the House Transportation Omnibus Bill has is it has the allocations for transit system operations and metro mobility operations. Those are kind of standing items that the legislature allocates funding for. Both the House and the Senate bill propose a new sales tax for the 7-county metro area, but it is a little bit different between the bodies. So the House bill is proposing, so they're both proposing 3/4 of a cent for sales tax in the metro region, and 5/6 of that 3/4, so I can't do the math, I can't tell you exactly how much that is, but 5/6 of that 3/4 cent sales tax would be spent for transit. And then the remaining 1/6 of those funds would go to the tab for other transportation projects. So that's in the House. We'll get to the Senate because it's a little bit different. Both the House and the Senate have various provisions in their omnibus bills that are related to transit safety and the administrative citations for fare non-payment that we've talked about in previous meetings. The House bill also has a establishment of a task force that would look at metropolitan governance, or how the Met Council is governed here. The House bill and the Senate bill actually have a pilot program establishment that could lead to additional hours of service for metro mobility to the extent feasible with funding and operations. The House bill has a transit fare elimination pilot project, which would be established in July and run for about 1.5 years, and would have the council select 2 bus lines that would have free transit service for those 18 months. And then the House Transportation Omnibus Bill also has a provision that would allow the Met Council to do bonding for regional transit capital funds. And those are funds that are primarily used to replace regional bus and paratransit vehicles, so Metro Mobility buses, including other regional buses. So there's a bunch of other things, but those are some of the highlights of what's in the House bill. The Senate bill, again, also has allocations for the transit system and for Metro Mobility. I heard, the Blue Line update. So the Senate bill allocates $50 million for a grant to Hennepin County for the Blue Line extension. They also have a 3/4 sales tax for the metro area. And similarly, 5/6 would go to the Met Council, and then 1/6, instead of going to the tab, would go to the County State Aid Highway Fund. Another difference is that of the 5/6 that would go to the council, they would expect 95% of that to be spent on transit, and 5% of it would be spent on active transportation. And then there's another active transportation program. So that could include funding bicycle trails, pedestrian infrastructure, and that could include the Safe Routes to School program. The Senate would also, they also have provisions related to transit safety and the administrative citations proposal that we've talked about. They would establish a charter commission to look at metropolitan governance. So the House has a task force and the Senate has a charter commission. And then they also have that Metro Mobility Enhancement Pilot Program that the House has as well. What's interesting is that the governor had recommended funding for some specific initiatives in his funding recommendations, including funding for electric buses, which I think we've talked about at a previous meeting, funding for some specific things for transit safety. And the bill does not fund some of the governor's recommendations specifically, and I think the assumption is that if the sales tax passes, that we would use some proceeds from the sales tax to pay for some of those projects, if that's something that the council would want to prioritize. And there is a list in both of the bills with a variety of transit projects that Met Council would be expected to fund if the sales tax were to go through. So that's a lot. I think I will stop there for now, see if you all have any questions about the omnibus bill, and then we can go into the other updates from there.
I'll forego my questions until the committee is done. Go ahead. Can't see your name tag over there, but Jeff. Sorry about that, Jeff.
Just clarity on, you said the Met Council could do bonding themselves. Are they allowed to do that now? I'm confused as to what you specifically said.
Yeah, Mr. Chair and committee member, thank you for the question. So the council does have some bonding authority, and then for the regional transit capital bonds, the state then provides some additional authority to us to bond up to a certain amount for those. They're called RTC, Regional Transit Capital Bonds. So those, the state would have, they set kind of that amount that we can bond to for those type of funding.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, Chris.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Hate to put you on the spot, Hannah, but staff has not been good at keeping the Green Line Advisory or Business Advisory Committee informed of the budget shortfalls. Is the state planning on covering that, or are they throwing it back to the Met Council? What's going to happen?
Sure. Thank you for the question. I would say that neither the House nor the Senate omnibus bills have a specific allocation for the Southwest Light Rail project, the Green Line extension. One of the bills, and I'm gonna mess up which one, so I won't say which one. One of the bills says specifically that the council would not be able to spend tax receipts from the sales tax on the Green Line extension until the Metropolitan Governance Task Force would be finished with their work, which I believe in the bill as it's currently written would be sometime next year. I think the other bill may be silent on it. But neither of the bills have any specific funding for the Green Line extension.
So there is no plan right now. What are we, a couple $100 million in the hole on that? That's what I mean. The staff has not kept us informed.
I can certainly pass that question along to the staff for the Green Line. I don't have the numbers about the Green Line budget off the top of my head, unfortunately.
Because they're still planning on opening this thing in 2027, but if we don't have the funds to cover it, how are we going to do that?
I'd be happy to follow up with the team at the Green Line office. I unfortunately don't know the specifics on that question.
We'll try
Okay, thanks, Hannah.
We'll try to get some over to you, Chris. Go ahead, Richard.
Pardon?
Yeah.
Just a question on the routes. They're going to eliminate fares on a couple of routes as a pilot project. What's the purpose of eliminating the fares, and does Metro Transit support that?
Mr. Chair, committee member, I think we'd have to ask the author of the bill what the purpose would be. I don't know that the council or Metro Transit has taken a position on that. I think that there is some language in the bill, and I should have brought they're like, several or hundreds of pages. I should have brought the bills with me. But there is language in the bill that would instruct the council on what to consider when picking which bus routes that would apply to. And I think it has to do with ridership as well as an estimate of people along the route who may kind of fall into a variety of categories. I would need to check the bill, but I think that there is some interest in this in the House bill. I don't believe there's any language about it in the Senate bill. So we'll have to see kind of what happens there.
Thank you. Patty, go ahead.
Going off what he said, what is the reason for eliminating the fare? What are they trying to accomplish?
We're not eliminating this.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to try to guess what someone else's intention is with the bill, but I'd be happy to share the bill language with you all if you're interested.
It just seems odd.
And I'll make sure later on today or tomorrow, I'll send a note over to Allison to make sure that you guys have copies of the links of the omnibus bills that Hannah's discussing right now. Also, I was a little confused as well. I was up there all day Friday, and all day Monday. I was not up there yesterday, but I did watch most of Representative Hornstein's presentation in the House. The one thing I was confused about after talking to Senator Dibble on Friday, he did assure me that the administrative citation was in the bill and it's going to be there. But then as I was looking at the spreadsheet and looking at the numbers, I asked him, so does that potentially mean that we saved the $2 million? And he's like, well, I'm not sure what you're saying. He's like, but I think we give the $2 million in a form of grant proposals, and those groups can grab those grants. And I said, I'm not sure I'm following with you. And then he started talking about the 3/4 cent sales tax, and an eighth of that will go to roads and bridges, right? And then the rest of it goes to the Met Council. Is that my understanding?
Yeah, so good question, Mr. Chair. There's a lot to keep track of at the legislature right now, and there's been various versions of these bills, and the bills are getting amended, and so there's been a lot of bill language to read in the past few weeks. So as you said, 5/6 of the bill would go to the Met Council. Again, the Senate and the House kind of allocate that somewhat differently. One of the proposals that the governor had with a supplemental budget that came out, I don't know, roughly a month ago, was to provide for additional funding for transit safety and security. So among the three things that were in that proposal specifically, one was to enclose up to 3 light rail platforms. One was to purchase additional cameras for the transit system, for staff to be able to monitor the transit system. And then a third was to provide grants, as you said, Mr. Chair, to different organizations who would be working on transit safety and security throughout the system. And then the administrative citations proposal has been amended, and it now includes additional kind of work that the legislature would like to see done on transit with regards to safety and security. So there's a new program that would be in the bill called the TRIP program, which, oh boy, I don't want to get the acronym wrong, but
The MAT team or whatever that.
yeah, so we do have a HAT team at Metro Transit and the police department, and the TRIP program would be somewhat, it would be to kind of help provide some additional support and wayfinding. They could do administrative citations. They could help.
Similar to the ambassador
It's kind of a different version of the ambassador program. Yeah. So one of the bills I think did have at one point, I might still have $2 million for kind of that rollout.
Okay, that must be where I was getting confused.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, the governor proposed $2 million for grants, like, similar but not exactly the same. But then a lot of the proposals that came from the governor, they are expecting that we would, I believe, they are expecting that would be partially, if not all, funded through this new metro area sales tax.
Sure, sure. And that, I've heard some of that as well. Also,
Ken has.
Ken, you have a question?
Yeah, I do. Thank you. Hannah, I don't know if you can answer much with this, and that's fine. But if you're aware, I'd like to know. You mentioned funding to expand Metro Mobility services. Do you have any indication of what that expansion, what we're talking about there?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So the proposal that's in both the House and the Senate bill would be expansion of hours for the service.
Okay. Thank you.
Ken, specifically, this is Andy. My understanding here, and Christine's in the audience to correct me here if anything at this stage is not what stuff is looking like, but my understanding is that it would largely target non-ADA service areas that currently have very early cutoff times and may not actually be Metro Mobility service per se, but that there would be some level of transportation provided within that Metro Mobility footprint at a later hour of the day. Maybe like our premium on-demand service, maybe something different, but some level of transportation later in hours for that non-ADA service area.
Okay, thanks for the clarification.
Yeah, and back to, I have a couple other questions, and I'll take most of my issues offline at some point. But as far as the administrative citation or the fare evasion, we're trying to switch this because we want to capture some of that money back. And do we only do the fare evasion or the administrative citation ticket if we change the code of conduct code? Because it seems like we're doing a lot of rigmarole to changing the code of conduct and what we're allowed to do and what we're not allowed to do on our vehicles, and in terms of lining up for this new program that we might be going into,
Mr. Chair, so I think my thought would be that if this proposal were to pass, that it might be worth seeing if someone from Metro Transit or Metro Transit Police Department could come and talk about the specifics. My understanding is that the administrative citations program or the administrative citations approach would be for fare non-payment. So, and then there are other provisions in the bill that would address the code of conduct questions that you're talking about. So they are proposing some differences in code of conduct, what would be, a petty misdemeanor versus what wouldn't be, and
It drops the fee from $150 or $200 down to $75 at some level, or
yeah, I don't remember exactly what's in the latest version of the bill, but there have been changes to the amount that, again, it would be more like a parking ticket instead of going through the court system for fare non-payment. One of the things for that proposal that I think is going to get some more discussion at the legislature. So, and maybe I can kind of jump into the next part, or we could stay at this. However, okay, it seems like there's at least one other question. But the administrative citations part of the bill is the standalone bill that has administrative citations in it is going to be heard in the Senate Judiciary Committee next week.
Yes,
as a separate.
Yeah, I'll be testifying on that
Oh,
bill,
well,
I
I'll see you
believe,
there
as well,
then.
So
So that will be a kind of separately happening while the entire omnibus continues to move forward. So I think there are some changes to different behaviors, and as you said, there's some changes to the code of conduct, and so that's an opportunity, I think, to have a more in-depth conversation about those topics.
Thank you. Yeah, Heidi.
This is not really a question, but from what I'm hearing today is kind of ties into what Channel 4 has been doing really good. So you could take it back to your people that what you're saying and how they're telling the community has really been kind of connecting. Now I understand what I learned from Channel 4 News, and how they're reporting it. Because they just yesterday talked about transit cops, the new people that are coming on board and, and how the legislators and the county put it all together, and then they talked about pretty much a lot of the same stuff you're talking about. So it's really neat to get both perspective and putting it together. So our community is learning about there's going to be some big changes, and I don't know about the tax part. I'm not very pleased about that, and I know the roads need to be fixed, but food is an important part of life, and that's. And for the low-income people, and I don't know if they're thinking about that, because I know they're talking about rent and tax, we don't need any more taxes, because I don't know if it falls back on the person who lives in an apartment or house or, all the different things, but you guys have been doing a really good job.
Thanks for your comments.
Thank you. The one thing other question I had was, out of everything that's in the bill, right? Because the 3/4 cent sales tax, it primarily funds transit in the metro area, and the other 1/4 cent sales tax funds some of the micro transit as well, right? So the other piece of that funds Greater Minnesota, right? The other half cent or whatever it is.
Mr. Chair, so the only sales tax proposal in the transportation bills are specific to the metro area.
Okay, and those are the ones that fund transit and they fund the micro transit, correct?
I know, I think, again, I can share the list of you about what different things the Met Council would be required to fund with the sales tax proceeds. So I'll share that. I'll add that to my list.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Having seen no other questions, I guess.
If you have questions over there.
Well,
Just a,
go ahead, sorry about that.
just a quick question.
I did it to you again, didn't I?
You did do
Sorry
it to
about
me,
that,
yeah.
sir.
And I can't see because I'm legally blind, so I can't see if you're
My
motioning
fault.
to me.
Well, then it's my fault. I'll have to.
That's fine,
I'll have to
that's
be more
fine.
diligent. Andy, why are you not paying attention to that?
Just-
Yeah, I need to, I know, it's, that's totally on me, Chair.
Thank you for
Just-
having my back.
Just a quick question, which doesn't relate to the transit stuff, but it came up earlier at our meeting about the open meeting law.
Yeah.
Was there any discussion earlier in the session? I know we're late in the session now about remote attendance at meetings. I know the League of Minnesota Cities was kind of all over the map in terms of open meeting law and people's ability to attend when they were sick. So, did that even come up this year at all?
I would have to check. That's a good question. I can see if any bills have been introduced on that and share that with folks as well.
That would be nice. And just for point of reference, I do believe it did come up a little bit. I forget which body introduced it right away, but it did get talked about. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it was the end of January, beginning of February. But I'm not sure what happened to
Because I know
that.
they do testimony sometimes, by video, so they allow certain things, but I don't know how broad they're going to span that, in this kind of situation that we asked earlier.
And I guess my last question before I let you go is, out of all the stuff that's in both Dibblesville and Hornsteinsville, what would be the biggest thing that you guys think that the opposition or the opposing side might be wanting to take out? Because I've heard so many things like, we want to take away the Met Council's authority to do bonding, and they shouldn't have the right to do bonding. And so, to me, I think that your bonding authority is the biggest thing that you want to protect this session, but I could be wrong.
It's a good question, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure. Both bodies, both transportation committees had several, dozens of amendments that were offered to each of the bills, and so
Yes,
I
I
think.
seen them.
Yeah, so that was an opportunity, I think, to hear where some questions or concerns might be. But the bills as they are now, are still moving their way through the process, so we, I think, we'll just see what happens. And it's not just, the transportation bill obviously it's not exclusively a Met Council bill. A lot of the funding also goes to the Department of Transportation and goes to the Department of Public Services, or Public Safety, excuse me. And so I think it's much broader than just us. But it's been interesting to sit in all the committees and kind of hear the discussion about the different priorities.
Well, I will tell you, out of the 22 years that I've watched transit, and I've been involved in transit here in Minnesota, I was impressed in the 2 days that I've spent watching you and Jed and the whole team of what you guys were putting together. So I wanted to make sure that, you have our interests going forward, as you hear what our interests are, and also that we're your voice too. So if there's things that you see out there that you think that we could talk about as advocates and as transit advocates, just let us know, because I think the Met Council in the next couple of years will definitely change. It will not look like it has in the last 20 years. So I think that is something that we have to prepare ourselves for. But the work that you guys have done in the last session and this session, it doesn't go unnoticed by me or by other transit users and advocates. So thank you, Hannah. And
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
give kudos to your team as well as to your boss.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Heidi.
Oh, and the other thing, well, from what Darrell said is, and also the times are going to change where it's not just wheelchairs and scooters and crutches. Well, I have a crutch, but it's processing too, the order to use transportation. I don't want it so complicated that I can't leave my house, you know? So they need to start thinking about the future of different ways that we could do it. Like, there are probably a bunch of people, like an example, have autism that can be out in the community, but if you make it so complicated, it might make it hard, or the noise, you know, or the environment. So we have to think about not just one way of thinking. You have to be open-minded of all kinds of, and also people coming from around the world too, you know, because we think differently in Minnesota than we do in other states, you know, and so just something to take back when you're fighting the good fight, you know, to make it, you know, so we can have transportation, so I can be here, because I get here by bus,
Right.
you know, and trains, and this is how I live my life. I'm never going to be able to drive, so keep that in the minds when you're at the Capitol, that for people who can't drive at all, and they have to rely on you, the state of Minnesota, to take care of them.
Thank you.
You know, and to Heidi's point, I will say that I've seen reports and surveys that the majority of folks, you know, and at least the young baby boomers or the young generation, maybe it's Generation X now, I don't even know what letters we're on right now, but I'm saying the majority of the young folks that I talk to, they are not interested in driving a car. They're not interested in having a car guzzling vehicle sitting out in a driveway that they use once or twice a day. They'd rather put their money into a walkable environment, a rideable, shareable experience like public transit. And the one thing that I wanted to kind of reiterate with Heidi that she mentions to you a lot is to remember folks that are maybe on the DD spectrum, developmental disabilities, or folks that have just simply processing issues or what they call executive brain function issues. Or in my case, I get disorientated. If the sun's in my eyes, or if it's hot out, I get really disorientated. Or if it's late at night, I get disorientated. Even though I've been here 1,000 times, if I'm out here at night and I get turned around in just a half a block, I'll get confused, and I'll get myself so upset for a half hour that I have to call somebody, and they eventually have to talk me down and say, "Hey, Darrell, where are you at? You know exactly where you're at. Just stop, think about where you're at." And then I put myself back on track. But the thing that I wanted to reiterate with Heidi is that we looked at, like the Green Line, for instance. One of the ways that we changed the Green Line was that each station along the Green Line was a different makeup. It had a different artist. It had a different attraction. It was a different color. The majority of the things that we talked about, like receptacles, trash receptacles, the pathway, where the benches were, they stayed the same. But if you had somebody that didn't know how to read or didn't know how to navigate a street system with a bunch of names, you could say, "I'm at the green station," or "I'm at the blue station." And right away, people will then begin to identify where people were at. So that is what I think Heidi's trying to get at, is to remember folks. There's all kinds of folks right now, not just folks with physical disabilities, but there's folks that are ambulatory that have some of those same issues. And they want to ride public transit. The one thing I will say, the rides that I took this week were a little bit different than any rides I've ever taken in 20 years of riding public transit. So I won't elaborate as to what those were, but I will tell you that they range from riding a Metro mobility bus to riding a train to riding a regular city bus. So I'm a multi-mode user, and I do know that there are problems on the system, but I also think that we're in a good spot to fix some of those issues.
And just a reminder, I use all of them. So then I have to rely on Minnesota to take care of them unless you stick me in the car, or Uber.
And with that, I let you have a few final words and tell us when you're coming back to talk to us next month.
Sounds great. Well, I want to just thank you all for sharing that, and I've been taking notes. I will plan to follow up with you all, and I'll send committee staff the language to both the omnibus bills. I will say I'm not sure if the Senate omnibus bill has incorporated all of the changes that took place on Monday, so if not, that would happen probably sometime Tuesday next week. So, but I'll check on that. And then what I have for follow-ups for you all is to make sure to point out where the transit fare elimination pilot program language is. And that's just in the House bill, where the Metro Mobility pilot project is, and that's in both bills. And then also in both bills, what will be funded, what the legislature would like the Met Council to fund with the sales tax that would be going to transit. And then separately, I have a follow-up to check in with the Green Line Project Office about the funding question. So I think that's what I have for you all, and I will plan to see you back here in early May.
Sounds good.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting me, and appreciate it.
And with that, we just have just under 10 minutes, or just about 10 minutes here to craft something I think is very much needed. But before I tell you that, I just want to tell you a quick experience that I had. Okay. So I often go up the Capitol 2-3 times a week. In a very different capacities, right? Sometimes I'm up there in a private vehicle. Sometimes I'm up there by Metro Mobility. Sometimes I go up there by bus. Sometimes I go up there by train. Okay? Well, in the last several weeks, the state office building, more importantly, the Sergeant at Arms, and the Speaker of the House, Melissa Hartman, they've taken it upon themselves to close the north door of the state office building, which that is the door that is most adjacent to public transit.
Yep.
They've been closing that door sporadically throughout session. They just, whenever they choose to close it, they close it. However, the other day I was so heated, I went down and said, hey, look, you need to keep these doors open, at least when there's public in the building, et cetera, et cetera. And they're like, who are you? And I'm like, well, we're not going to discuss who I am, but you're about to find out who I am if we're going to continue to talk like this. And she's like, well, what is it you want to do anyway? And I'm like, I need that door to remain open during business hours. And she says, well, not going to happen. I'm like, why? She says, because there's been crime and things going on that we disagree with. And if you don't like that, then we've had some people stealing some stuff out of the state office building. I said, interesting. So she eventually asked me to leave her office. I was heated at this point. So, of course, I was swearing, dropping F-bombs and everything, which probably wasn't the most appropriate thing to do, and probably not the most normal thing to do. But as you can tell by my behavior, sometimes I get heated, and then I don't know how to calm it down. So eventually what happened was I went up, talked to the speaker. I left messages with the speaker. We we've seen each other a couple of days later. We apologize to each other. They are working through a process of hoping to keep those doors open during session and during business hours. What that means technically, when they say during business hours, that means they'll close the doors at 4:30. If they leave them open till 4:30, which they haven't, they've been closing them at 2:30. So at 4:30 comes, I can't get through the tunnel to get back to my Metro Mobility bus. So I often have to call ahead to the next building to make sure somebody's watching me. So the other night, I was there till 8, 9 o'clock at night. Of course, I got stuck in there twice. Luckily, I wasn't with my daughter or anybody, but I had to wait there for at least 20 minutes before somebody walked through and let me through, when I know darn well they could just push a button and open the door.
Yeah.
But, so having said all that, and that might have been too much, but I'm asking TAAC to at least support a letter, and David Finley has already agreed to draft the letter in support of our request, if it goes through, that we would ask, as members of TAAC and the Met Council, we would ask that the state office building, along with the Sergeant Arms, keep the doors open on the north side and the south side of the state office building during session, and when there's public testimony going on in the building. So that means even after 4:30,
Oh,
if
yeah, that
if
makes
there's
sense.
if there's committee hearings going on.
Because then you can't get food or anything.
Yep, so I'm asking TAAC to make a motion, and somebody to second that motion, and then David and I will work out the details, and we'll draft a letter to.
Are we going to talk about that it takes away one of the handicapped accessible ways of getting? Because the only other way is to go all the way around the
Yep, that,
building.
yep,
Or-
and when I asked the Sergeant Arms about that, I said, well, what do you, that means we have to go all the way around? And I'm like, but there are people that don't go all the way around, they turn around, go, and went into another building, and I said, why do you think that happens? And she said, because they can't read. I said, interesting. Now we're picking on people because they all of a sudden can't read. Well, I don't read that well either, but I knew enough that when the door's locked, it should not be locked.
'Cause the
So,
only other
Mr.
option-
Chairman,
Go ahead, sorry, Chris, I went off on a tangent there, sorry about that.
no, I support you completely, and I will make the motion that TAAC support yours and David's efforts.
And I would like to second that.
Thank you.
I'll third.
See, Claudia, you got off the hook anyway, you didn't have to do it.
Okay.
Thank you. So,
Do we write in,
who made the motion and who seconded?
Chris made the motion.
I did.
Carrie seconded.
Thank you.
and I thirded.
Well, we can just say, we can take a vote on it if we need to, or if there's any.
Call the
further-
question, Mr.
Well,
Chairman.
actually, if there's any further discussion or not, I'd like to call a question and we'll take a vote on it.
Could I just ask a question?
Yes, please.
Is this an ADA compliance issue? Like, would this follow, was there a grievance form that was filed?
There has not been at this point. I don't know if I could say this, but I did follow up with Chair Finley about this, and he did reach out to them. Did not tell them. I'm probably certain he did not tell them that he knew me and knew what my issue was, because when they spoke to him, they gave him a song and dance about people fornicating and having sex on the bench. And I said, David, don't drink that Kool-Aid. That is Kool-Aid that is poisoning you, and don't drink it. And so he hung up on me, and we called each other back or texted each other back, and the result was, if TAAC wants a letter, he'll draft a letter, and we'll push this forward. So,
Can I say one thing? Darrell?
yeah, go ahead.
I actually been at the Capitol, so I know what Darrell's talking about, and I had to figure it out, because I came, like I normally do, off the train, straight to the door, and the door was shut. And I had to go all the way around the back, which is close to the transportation building. And the only other accessible way to get in, if you can do the steps, and I have done them, but you have to hit the right doors, because if you don't, then you're screwed, because one's a spin and one's an open up door type. Depends on where you land on, when you're done going up the steps. So, and I thought it was kind of strange, but then I know one of the security guards there, and she told me it's because of, people in the community are not behaving, so they had to do something to figure out how to stop it, from
Right, and Heidi, those are all excuses.
That's what I
Because
was
when I asked them to
told.
show it to us, they will not show us anything. So the fact is, excuses are excuses, and if they don't have any merit or any warrant, then we don't listen to them. We just demand that they keep those doors open. That is the people's house. They need to keep those doors open. And one of the solutions that I will ask them to do, because they have the ability to do it already, is that if they need a push button for me to indicate that I need to come into that building, then I can push a button, and then they can see
They can do
me,
that.
and then they can let me in. So if that's
Darrell,
what,
that's sort of like under the Capitol building, where there's a button
Yep.
you can push, and then it will allow you into the Capitol. There's no different why we can't have that at the state office
Heidi,
and the House of
they
Representatives.
have that already in the state office building. The problem is they're not using their cameras, and they're also carrying around a computer, a laptop that belongs in a car, and because of that, they're not watching those cameras like they should be.
I just know that the Capitol has one, because I actually left something in the Capitol, and they let me in after hours, and I grabbed it, and they trusted me. So I know it can work to what Darrell's saying.
And it will work. And Chris and Carrie, if I can loop you guys into that letter that David and I will draft, and then we'll share that letter with the committee. It will probably go out after
help?
Allison does the minutes for this meeting.
Do you need my help?
That's fine with me, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to
Sure, I
call
can
the
put you
question
on.
because we got to get it done.
Yeah, let's call it.
Yep.
So all in favor of approving a letter from TAAC saying that the doors of the north side of the state office building and the south side of the state office building must remain open as long as there are public and there are committee meetings
Is that all
in
hours?
process.
Are you talking all hours, even in the evenings?
Yes.
Okay, because you have to make that very clear to them.
Well, it is clear because it says during all public meetings and during regular business hours.
Wow, everyone's got a definition. That means-
Call the question, Mr. Chairman.
The question's been called. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. Abstain. You can abstain if you
Oh,
want.
Ken needs to hear what, because he left.
Oh, sorry about that, Ken.
You're gonna explain it to Ken?
Ken, we were taking a motion on the vote for a letter to the state office building to make the doors on the south side and the north side remain open during business hours and during all public, when there's public in the building. I can't hear you. You're muted.
He did turn off before he left.
Okay,
Yep,
yes.
okay.
He supports it.
So we're all good. And with that, I move for.
Mr. Chairman, I have one point I'd like to
Oh,
bring up with
sorry,
you.
I forgot member comment and then public comment, but yeah, we're under member comment right now. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Dave, remember you and I talked a few months ago when we were giving out the awards for the 30 years of service?
We did.
And we talked about having some kind of recognition for the former TAAC members. And I would like to see you and David set up a time where we can, because this has been a 30-year process with Metro Mobility and everybody's contributed. at some point to make this a better system. And I think TAAC should sponsor some kind of get-together for the former TAAC members.
Well, if you want to make that motion, and.
So moved.
Next time, or actually, we can vote on it this time, I guess. We
Do
can,
we do it now or do we?
That, or we can put it on the agenda for next month.
let's put it on the agenda for next month. I see a couple head shaking and a couple nods.
Yep, let's put it on the agenda for next month. That's all I got, and I'll help you organize that.
Because we
Thank
would need
you.
to talk about all the ins and outs and how that works.
Yep. So with that, I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
And well, that means we're out of here at 2:33. 3 minutes over, sorry.
That's all right.
Have a good day, folks.
Thank you.